Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Universal Peace Federation. My name is Ray Lapalkin, and this is part of our IMAP series, which is the International Media Association for Peace. And we're promoting ideas on how the media presents certain issues or topics to the public. And today is a continuation of the program that we had last time. It's New Religions, Cult Experts, and the Media Part 2. And it'll be a continuation of Dr. Ward's presentation. And this time he's also going to be joined by Professor Joel Campbell from Brigham Young University School of Journalism in Utah. And they'll be discussing why the media seems to present just one side of the story and not really going to the new religion themselves and trying to understand or let them present their perspective. So I hope you'll get a better understanding of this. And as I mentioned last time, United Nations being primarily a Judeo-Christian nation, we could probably wonder, well, why would people oppose Christianity? But yet we still see it happening so many places in the world where people are opposing it. So perhaps they just don't understand it. And why did 2,000 years ago the Roman Empire opposed Christianity? Why didn't they understand it? So perhaps lessons we can learn, but let's listen to their presentation and see what they have to say. So please enjoy this.
On May 7th, 1993, I wrote an editorial that appeared in the Poughkeepsie Journal. And in it, I spoke about the Waco tragedy. And I mentioned there the pivotal role that Rick Ross had played in that. And I spoke about the tie-in between what happened at Waco, the way the FBI dealt with the Branch Davidians, and deprogramming. According to snapping, and snapping, it's written by, again, people who are not experts. They don't have terminal degrees in psychiatry or in religion or anything else. They were basically people that traveled around the country and wrote. Smart people, but they were not trained in the area. And they talked about the conversion to new religions. And they said that there were key dimensions to it, such as depriving inductees of food, depriving them of sleep, subjecting them to an information overload with prayer, singing, long repetitive lectures that would eventually cause them to snap through quote, this is their term, an infinitely complex convergence of physical, mental, and emotional stresses that, quote, crest in a holographic crisis in the brain, then resolve into a whole new organization of mind and personality. This is a narrative. It's not scientific. They have no basis to make this kind of observation. But anyway, that's how they chose to depict this. If we look at the testimony of the FBI figures who were in charge of Waco, we find that they did precisely the same things as are described in snapping as the process to convert someone and likewise to unconvert someone. They tried to deprive David Koresh and his followers of food, supplies, and sleep. They exposed them repeatedly all night to flashing lights, blaring Tibetan chants, and music and squealing of squealing rabbits. They wanted to persuade, this is their term, David Koresh's followers that their leader was a thief, a liar, a child molester, and a profanity-spouting con man. Exactly the same type of ad hominem attacks which exist within deprogramming. And the FBI agent in charge, if you can believe it, he said that he wanted to reverse Koresh's followers' mindset and give them, quote, a chance to think for themselves. You see the subset of this book by Steve, empowering people to think for themselves. This was also a term that was repeatedly used by Ted Patrick, who started the whole deprogramming anti-cult movement. There was concern after Waco about the way in which people had been mistreated, about the way in which the whole event had been handled, and whether it was really necessary for it to result in the kind of tragedy that it resulted at the end. And Professor Nancy Hammerman, who was at that time a professor of sociology of religion at Boston University, was called upon to lead an investigation of the federal government's mishandling of Waco. And she pointed to the FBI and to the events there And what she said, Mr. Rick Ross was closely involved with both the ATF and the FBI. Ross clearly had the most extensive access to both agencies of any person on the cult expert list. Ross was listened to more attentively. Ammerman learned that Ross recommended that agents attempt to publicly humiliate Koresh, hoping to drive a wedge between him and his followers. And this was actually done. Ammerman notes that those embarrassment tactics were indeed tried. And furthermore, it's pointed out that Steve Hassan, what he emphasized to the agents was that they should never speak when they spoke in their announcements about David Koresh using his name. Instead, they should use his given name of Vernon. What did that help? What purpose did that serve? Philip Arnold, who is a religious scholar at the Reunion Institute, which is located in Texas, and was one of the key mediators on the religious side, who was trying to bring Koresh and his followers out safely, and he believed he was making progress in that area, and was stunned when a decision was suddenly made to go in and to launch the intervention, which transpired and took so many lives. He emphasized that his voice was not listened to properly, and I was fortunate enough. He read my article when he asked to come and meet me, and we met in New York. I was happy to have a conversation with Philip Arnold back there at that time, and he was just filled with so much regret because he felt that what happened, it definitely did not have to happen. And both he and James Tabor of the University of North Carolina had worked very hard in order to try to emphasize the role that intelligent dialogue could have played in somehow reversing that situation and avoiding the tragedy that resulted. Massimo Introvigne, whom some of you may be aware of, and who is the president of CESNOR, which is the Center for the Study of New Religions, which is located in Italy, has made a very important observation about the way in which these cult experts approach new religions. As he puts it quite simply, when you assess any religion based on purely psychological criteria, you open the way to assessing all religions based on purely psychological criteria. And that's already what has happened through books such as Andre McNichol's Catholic Cults. So to come to a conclusion, this nation was a nation founded on profound religious roots. And even some of the most significant social developments, such as Dr. Martin Luther King's civil rights movement, had religion at the very heart and soul of it and appealed to that dimension of Americans. It was in 1962, in Engel versus Vitale, that school prayer ended in the United States. We know that the Ten Commandments have been removed from so many public places over the years since then as well. We know that there have been education programs inside of public schools against so-called new religious movements, the so-called cults. And at the same time, condoms are freely distributed in those same public schools without parents knowing about it. And likewise, abortions are conducted through the help of those schools without the parents ever knowing about it. And likewise, today, there's a tremendous gender confusion going on with young boys using the women's room, the women's locker room, and vice versa. This type of confusion has transpired. Franklin D. Roosevelt was a visionary when he said, "Where freedom of religion has been attacked, the attack has come from sources opposed to democracy. Where democracy has been overthrown, the spirit of free worship has disappeared. And where religion and democracy have vanished, good faith and reason in international affairs have given way to strident ambition and brute force." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ward. That was a very in-depth and thorough explanation, and you definitely showed your passion for this topic. So I think we all picked up on that. Thank you. And I'm happy that you showed both the positive and negative examples of the power and influence of the media on our lives. So thank you for that. At this time, I'd like to welcome up Professor Campbell. Professor Campbell is an associate professor in Brigham Young University School of Communication since 2002. He holds a master's degree from Ohio State University, and he teaches communication studies and journalism courses. He actively researches media and religion, media ethics, and law and freedom of information issues. His publications include Mitt Romney's Religion, a 5-factor model for analysis of media representation of Mormon identity, Artemis Ward, The Forgotten Influence of the Genial Showman's Mormon Lecture on Public Opinion of Mormons in the United States and Great Britain, and Baptism of Fire, a comparative analysis of media coverage of the LDS Church's practice of proxy baptisms. Welcome, Professor Campbell.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I'm going to share my screen and hopefully can you see that screen now? Let's see.
Yes, it came up.
Great. Okay. Well, I welcome all those from around the country, and I love talking with my unification friends. I served my Latter-day Saint mission in Korea and met many fine unification people there. So Dr. Ward, annyeonghaseyo. So I just wanted some responses. These are kind of random responses, but I want to call, first of all, kind of a contemporary issue for us as Latter-day Saints. In 2018, the man we regard as president and prophet of our church, Russell M. Nelson, asked the world to stop calling us Mormons, and even changed the Mormon.org website. And it's no longer the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, but the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square. At that point, the Associated Press actually changed its style book, but has since backtracked. They originally changed the style book to refer to the name of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And but now they a lot of journalists say, well, you know, Mormons must not is widely understood, and it really doesn't fit in the lead paragraph of a story or the headline. So I guess the middle ground that's come about is that a lot of journalists will use the full name of the church and maybe the second or third paragraph, but often use Mormon throughout. A friend of mine did a study recently showing who's adopted the change in most of the Utah media has adopted the change, but across the world, the actually coverage that's critical or mocking continues to use the term Mormon. So the M word that you have is also similar to our M word. And I really agree with you about the selection of questionable sources. My paper that was mentioned about the media coverage of the Mitt Romney campaign, this is not just Mitt Romney, but I think we're starting to see it now with the DeSantis campaign. I'm not saying I'm supporting any candidate, but already Ron DeSantis is being attacked over faith. And who are the sources they're using? They're not religion sources, it's political sources. And that's what happened here. We had, I don't want to disparage some of my Baptist friends, but there are some Baptists that don't like Latter-day Saints. And that became the source rather than talking to believers. It was talking to political opponents. And unfortunately, political reporters aren't as sophisticated as many of our good religion reporters we have in the United States. So the biggest thing, I think, is just talk to believers. During that campaign, you mentioned Society of Professional Journalists. I'm a proud member of that, have been since college. I wrote a column in their magazine called Quill, and I said, instead of going to people who don't understand my faith or people who think they understand my faith, why don't you go to church? Here's how you can go to church. Go talk to the believers. That's how you should cover a campaign about Mitt Romney. We're also not free from the David Koresh syndrome. As a young reporter in 1988, there was a standoff of a break-off polygamous group in Marion, Utah. I was there, and they also used the same tactics that you talked about with David Koresh. It was the middle of winter. They'd rented a motorhome for us to stay in, but he couldn't sleep all night because of the whining, the sounds and all this sort of thing. They used the exact same kind of thing. So I was exposed to the same things they did in Koresh up in Marion, Utah, which again ended in a shootout, and a police officer was shot. Falun Gong, our version in the Latter-day Saints, is called The Banner of Heaven by John Krakauer. A popular book, recently became a cable series. And John Krakauer's basic premise is that violence and violent tendencies are part of the DNA of Latter-day Saints no matter what, which to me is totally ludicrous, but became part of this, even more so than the book, part of the cable series that's been popular. And a lot of stereotyping, a lot of things like that. So I think we're in the same area when we talk about the abuse of the media. And I'm a journalist. I practiced journalism for 20 years. And I will say that we have, Latter-day Saints have been victims. So this idea of marginalized faith get different treatments than perhaps mainstream faiths. I totally agree with that. I think that there is a hunger among journalists to somehow sensationalize, or like you say, make a name for themselves by covering marginalized faiths in a way that's different than we would cover mainstream and Roman Catholicism perhaps now, or Main Street Baptists or Lutherans, but even many of those groups, the Baptists were kind of an outlaw gang in the early founding of the United States, and found haven up in that radical place called Rhode Island with Roger Williams, excuse me. And so there was religious freedom in our country has started out with this bias. So to me, one of the key things that I think Dr. Ward would agree with is that journalists should allow people of that faith to self-identify, to tell their own story. I mentioned the Mitt Romney campaign coverage. I just wanted to add a couple things. While we're talking about the last maybe half century, this idea of bias is not a new thing in the American landscape. In the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, just a fun couple anecdotes. The Saints had gathered to Utah, and there was editorials almost daily in the New York press about what we're going to do about the Mormons. I'll use the term, but one of the ideas was, let's distribute Bibles. We'll take a trainload of Bibles out and distribute Bibles. One of the elders of the church said, sure, we need more Bibles, bring them on. The Protestant missionaries, probably the earlier form of deprogrammers of the day, set up small churches. There's one not far from me here where I live that's still in existence, hasn't grown much. Protestant missionary work was, and also Latter-day Saints were the target of immigration rules in both the United States and in Great Britain. Thankfully, a man named Winston Churchill was wise enough to not allow the immigration rules to be put intact for immigration from Great Britain. I have been I want to talk about agenda setting and gatekeeping, certainly very important concepts that we study in communication. Although I would probably say agenda setting and gatekeeping is not as strong as it once was because of new media, social media. There's certainly ways now, and so maybe that agenda setting and I would say gatekeeping probably not really much at all, although you're right. CNN, MSNBC, Fox do have agenda setting power, and they still do that. And I think the sources, you're spot on when you say that there needs to be use of academic and interfaith sources to talk about what people believe and how they believe it. I wanted to share this because I thought it was enlightening. It's something I found in 1844 in the New York Herald. Editor was a famous editor of the time, James Gordon Bennett. This was after the martyrdom of the prophet Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram. This is what he wrote in his newspaper, and I think it applies to us today. There can be no doubt that political feeling entered largely into the popular excitement in that region against the Mormons. He noted that the Whig Party worried LDS church members would support their rival, Democratic candidate James K. Polk, in that year's presidential election. In turn, the party's newspaper in Illinois had created much of the anti-Mormon sentiment that led to the assassination of the leader and his brother. This is his quote, which I think bears fruit today. This affords another and most melancholy illustration of the pernicious, demoralizing, brutalizing influence of the party presses, which are daily influencing the passions of the people by the vilest and most incendiary tirades against their respective opponents. And unfortunately, in an era when we're seeking for religious understanding and dignity, I see those kinds of vile and incendiary tirades also taking place in the media of today. Maybe, while Pulitzer had his problems, I think that this is still the goal for good journalists, and maybe we can say that. What is every business's business is nobody's business except the journalist. It is his by adoption, but for his care, almost every reform which would fall stillborn, he holds officials to their duty, he exposes secret schemes of plunder, he promotes every hopeful plan of progress. Without him, public opinion would be shapeless and numb. He brings all classes, all professions together and teaches them to act in concert of the basis of their common citizenship. And I think, Dr. Ward, you're absolutely correct in saying that journalists fall short when it comes to reporting about religion in this area. And so just a thought there. So this is one of my favorite. There's a new book by the title of this. It's called Christopher Stendhal's The Rule of Religious Understanding. The book's name is Holy Envy, but these are the 3 rules which I like to apply now to religion reporting as well as religious understanding. First, when trying to understand another religion, you should ask the adherents of that religion and not its enemies. That would be the programmers or the anti-Mormons or whoever it might be. Don't compare your best to their worst. So every faith may have warts or might have things that people might consider, odd or whatever. And then also leave for holy envy. When did this happen? This statement happened when the Latter-day Saints were trying to build a temple in Oslo, and Christer Stendhal was the bishop of Sweden, and he held a press conference. This is where Dr. Ward, I might say, I think I want to introduce an interfaith element to this. I think we can defend each other. And that is that he stood up as the bishop of the Lutheran bishop and said, he announced these 3 rules. And then he said something interesting. Latter-day Saints believe in posthumous baptism or baptism for the dead, where you can do a ritual for deceased ancestors. And he says, I have holy envy for that fact. And I could see myself doing that. So I think and I take my students of world religions, we have a media and world religion class, and I ask them to always have holy envy and to compare our best to their best when we go to these things. I think there's also, through interfaith alliance, along with the things you've mentioned, we can also build some ground. I'm not sure what my time is here. What are we looking like? I do have some other things I'd like to share, but Ray, what's our time like?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so the ethics question. So I really like this idea of asking adherents what they believe. One of my colleagues in what we call the journalism and mass communication academic area in religion and media, his name is Joe Grimm. He was a former reporter at the Detroit Free Press. He has a project every semester, and he asks 100 questions about different faiths, Islam, Latter-day Saints, Catholicism, whatever it might be. And then he asks people like me to help answer the questions. And these have been wonderful. I realize this is like a great approach. They're not very expensive, by the way. You can buy his guides on Amazon, but this is a great application of the SPJ Code of Ethics, and Joe Grimm has been part of the ethics group at SPJ. So let's develop objective answers to questions about different faiths. I'm just using my own because I know about it, but I know that there's others here. And then now, Dr. Ward, you may not agree totally. This is the Religion News Writers Association, Religion News Association. This is out of the religion style book about cults. So I like the first part of it. We might not all agree on the last part of it. It says cult, a term that has come to be associated with religious groups from outside the mainstream that have overly controlling leadership or dangerous practices. For that reason, journalists should use it with greatest care and only when they are certain it fits. Now, they say that it does fit People's Temple, Heaven's Gate, Branch Davidians. We might disagree on that, and maybe we should have a dialogue with the Religion News Association. But anyway, I think the point you made that the FBI and those reporting on it didn't go to religion experts to really understand what the Branch Davidians believed and what was going on there. So I'm just going to hit these really quickly. The 7 sins of religion reporting, and then I'll tie it up. So I think instead of the word cult, probably one of the things that's appeared more and more in religion reporting today is fundamentalist. That's almost become a bad word, or in certain ways. And so be careful about using the term fundamentalist unless the religious group uses it. Deadly sin, so don't use simplistic labels like Orthodox Mormons or fundamentalists or whatever. Labels don't help. Instead, go talk to the people and have them explain what they believe rather than try to attach a stereotyping label. Assume that religion equals politics. Unfortunately, I see so much work today that shows that if you say Republicans believe this, you know, Republicanism is equated with conservative religion in some way. Treat religious doctrines as their opinions. And so this is one thing that really hurts me and sticks in my craw, is that, you know, if you have a religious belief that you deeply believe in, journalists often mock it or take it for granted. We have a newspaper here in town in Salt Lake that the governor asked everybody to pray for rain. And boy, did we get rain and snow this year. We had record levels of snow in the mountains. He asked us to thank God again for the snow and to pray for more rain for next year. And the local newspaper, you know, mocked him. As if, you know, this guy's crazy. Well, why not have religious dialogue about prayer in our public spaces? Be lazy. Always settle for a quote or two from someone with an authority. This goes right to the heart of your, you know, the guys that have these authoritative titles. They've made themselves, they're activists for or against something. And instead, go talk to real people who really understand a faith. Go talk to an academic inside the faith or outside the faith. And those would be great. Focus on the lurid side of religion. That's one. Number 6, always focus on the big things and ignore the small. Religion's part of everyday life, and I think the media misses lots of great stories when it's focused on smaller issues. And number 7, ignore the role that religion plays in other important aspects of modern life. Religion's almost every part of life. Recently, we had a conference of religious leaders and religious reporters from Latin America at BYU. And one of the panelists who came got a copy of the New York Times that day, and he gave an example of how almost every story on the front page could have a religious angle to it if the religion reporters would understand that. So I think we opened up some doors from some Latin American reporters to report about all faiths, not just my faith or another faith fairly. So I'm going to end it there, but I hope that was a decent response, and I really enjoyed joining this group.
It certainly was. Thank you so much, Professor Campbell. Yeah, and both you and Dr. Ward have firsthand experience, and so you both are so qualified to speak on this topic. So thank you to both of you for being here today. Welcome back. I hope that you enjoyed those presentations. And if you'd like to continue the discussion, or if you have some questions, please get in touch with us. Our contact information has been up throughout the program, and you'll see our credits at the end as well. And our website is us.upf.org. You can get in touch with us there as well. So Universal Peace Federation, again, we're promoting interdependence, mutual prosperity, and universally shared values, trying to bring peace and harmony to our world. So if you'd like to join us or learn more, again, please get in touch with us. And our co-founders, Dr. Reverend Sun Myung Moon and his wife, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon's autobiographies are available complimentary. If you would like to get in touch with us, we'll get one out to you. So thank you for joining us today.